The night split open with fire. Something burned across the sky, a ship, a dying star, and slammed into the forest beyond the ridge. Eli Thorne didn't believe in omens, but that one felt like it carried teeth. The sound came seconds later, a deep-throated roar that rattled the cabin walls and sent birds screaming into the cold night air. For a long moment, he stood on the porch with a hammer still in his hand, staring at the streak of smoke curling above the tree line like a black wound in the sky. He told himself to let it go. Not his problem. The world had plenty of problems, and he'd spent enough years throwing himself into theirs. That was the point of this place: silence, distance, 100 acres of forest between him and everything else. But then the second sound came, a high, sharp whine, mechanical, unnatural. It echoed off the ridges like the voice of something hunting. Eli set the hammer down and went inside. When he came back out, it was with the old rifle slung across his back and a flashlight in his grip. Habit, not hope, carried him toward the ridge. The air smelled wrong when he reached the clearing metal and ozone, the sharp stink of something. Scorched. A gouge ripped through the trees ahead, trunks splintered and smoking where something massive had torn through them. At the far end, a shape lay broken among the wreckage, still glowing faint red from heat. The ship, if it could even be called that, looked like a blade bent into a crescent, its surface pulsing faintly as if alive. Pieces of it hissed and crackled in the frost. Eli scanned for movement, for bodies, for any sign this wasn't just some nightmare fallen out of orbit. Then he saw her. She was crawling, dragging herself out of the wreck with a kind of stubborn grace that made his chest tighten. For one shocked second, his mind tried to force her into something human, a wounded pilot, a woman in some strange suit. Then the beam of his flashlight swept across her, and reality tilted Dot's skin the color of pale amethyst, blood glinting silver-purple in the snow. Dark curls clinging wet to a face that was almost human, except for the symmetry that felt too precise. The eyes God, the eyes luminescent violet, even as they fluttered half shut with pain. She collapsed. Just beyond the wreck, breath coming in shallow gasps. Eli hesitated, muscles locking with the old instinct to assess, to plan. He should walk away. He didn't know what the hell she was, and that ship back there had enemies. He could feel it in the air, in the low hum building over the treetops. The hum grew louder. Eli knelt before he could think better of it. Her blood was hot and slick against his hands as he lifted her. She tried to speak, a whisper of syllables that curved like music, alien and fragile. Then her head lolled against his chest, and she went limp. "Shit," he muttered, already moving. Back toward the cabin. Toward a choice he knew he couldn't undo. By the time he laid her on the couch, the humming outside had sharpened into the shriek of drones slicing through the night. Eli killed the lights, heart pounding, breath steaming in the dark. He turned back to her just as her eyes snapped open bright as molten amethyst in the gloom, and locked on him with a look that promised two things he couldn't yet name: danger and trust. The underground bunker smelled of damp earth and rust, a forgotten relic carved into the rock beneath Eli's cabin decades ago. It had saved him once, during storms and blackouts, but never like this. Never with something or someone like her lying on the old steel cot, breathing in shallow, uneven pulls of air. He worked by lantern light, hands steady despite the storm raging in his chest. Training kicked in the same drills that had carried him through firefights and broken men in deserts half a world away. Assess the wound, control the bleeding, stabilize, except he'd never treated anyone whose blood shimmered like molten silver when it caught the light. Her flight suit was torn and fused in places, a strange metallic weave that clung stubbornly to her skin. Eli sliced it open carefully with his hunting knife exposing a deep gash along her ribs. The sight hit him like a punch, not the wound, but the way her skin shifted color under his touch, darkening from pale lavender to a bruised shade of indigo, as though reacting to pain. "Jesus," he muttered under his breath. "What the hell are you?" The alien stirred, eyelids fluttering. For a moment, her eyes cracked open, catching the lantern glow and turning it into something otherworldly. Amethyst bright, almost luminescent. She focused on him, confusion and defiance warring in her gaze. Then her lips parted, and a string of words spilled out in a language that curled like smoke, lyrical and sharp. "I don't." Eli stopped himself. Pointless. He didn't understand a damn thing. Still, he spoke, his voice low, steady. "Gonna be okay. Just stay with me." He didn't know why he said it. Maybe for her. Maybe for himself. The wound was bad. Without proper care, she wouldn't last the night. And what was proper care for someone who wasn't even human? Eli did what he could: clean the gash with boiled water, sealed it with strips of sterilized cloth. Praying infection didn't work the same way for her kind. When it was done, he sank into the chair opposite the cot, wiping her blood from his hands. The lantern flickered, shadows dancing across her face. Up close, she was beautiful in a way that made his throat tighten. Not soft like the women he'd known, but sharp-edged elegance built for strength. Every line of her spoke of resilience, of a life lived under harsher suns than his own. The hum came again, low, mechanical. Too close. Eli froze, head tilting. Not the wind, not an animal. A sound that didn't belong to these woods. He killed the lantern, plunging them into darkness. His pulse thundered as he moved to the hatch ladder, climbed silently up to the cabin, and eased the trapdoor just enough to peer outside. Through the trees, ghostly beams swept the snow-cold white light, cutting across the night in perfect grids. The drones. Sleek black shapes hovered above the tree line, their movements precise, methodical. Searching, hunting, not for him. For her. Eli's jaw clenched. Whoever they were, whatever they wanted, they weren't stopping until they found her. And if they found her here, no, he wouldn't let that happen. He slipped back down into the bunker, sealing the hatch behind him. She was awake now, or half-awake eyes glimmering faintly in the dark like twin shards of starlight. When he crouched beside her, she spoke again, this time slower, as if picking words carefully. "You help me." The voice was soft, accented, music tangled in the syllables. Her English was broken, but the meaning was clear. "Yeah, Eli," sighed, keeping his tone calm, even as adrenaline screamed through him. "I'm helping." Her gaze flicked toward the ceiling, toward the faint hum vibrating through the ground. "They come," she whispered. "Danger for you." She tried to push herself up, wincing as the movement tore at her wound. Eli pressed her gently back against the cot. "Easy. You're in no shape to fight. You go." The words cracked like dry branches, raw with pain. "Leave me." "Not happening," Eli said, and something in his voice steel, wrapped in quiet fury, made her still. "You're not dying on my watch. Not out there. Not in here." For a moment, neither of them moved. Her violet eyes searched his face, reading something in him that even he wasn't sure was there anymore. Finally, she whispered, almost to herself, "Why?" Eli didn't answer right away. He didn't have an answer that made sense. Only this truth. After years of running from ghosts, he'd found someone bleeding and afraid on his doorstep. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he wasn't about to let her go dot above them. The sound of the drones grew fainter, their search sweeping deeper into the forest. Eli stayed crouched beside her until the hum faded into silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was a low promise that felt heavier than any oath he'd ever taken. "They won't find you," he said. "Not as long as I'm breathing." Her eyes closed slowly, lashes trembling against her cheeks. For the first time since he'd found her, the tension in her body eased. Trust, fragile and wordless, settled between them like the first snow. On the pines, Eli didn't move for a long time, because deep down he knew the storm wasn't over. It had only just begun. The forest above them sang with winter wind, soft and mournful. But down here, the world was narrow and hushed, a bunker of stone, steel, and shadows. The old battery lantern cast a fragile circle of light, pushing back. The dark just enough to make the space feel human. Almost. Eli sat on the edge of the cot, elbows on his knees, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Her breathing had steadied, slower now, but not strong. He'd checked the bandage twice already. The bleeding was under control, but infection? Fever? He didn't know what those looked like on her kind. He didn't know anything except that walking away would have been easier, cleaner. He wasn't built for easy anymore. She stirred, lashes fluttering like the wings of some strange bird. Her eyes opened brighter than before, sharp enough to catch the lantern glow and turn it into shards of violet light. For a second, she just looked at him, her gaze flicking over his face as if cataloging details. Then her lips parted, and music spilled out soft, curling syllables in a language he didn't know but wanted to. He shook his head slowly. "Sorry, sweetheart. English is all I've got." She frowned slightly at that, then closed her eyes, breathing a word with effort. Eli. His name, shaped carefully by an alien mouth dot, hit him harder than it should have. "That's me," he said softly, leaning closer. "Eli. Asterisk." She nodded, tiny, deliberate, then pressed a hand weakly against her side. Her fingers came away, streaked with silver blood. He reached for the rag on the chair, catching her wrist gently. "Don't," he murmured. "You'll tear it open." 4. A moment, their eyes locked, hers luminous, his shadowed by the dim lantern light. She didn't pull away, though. Didn't fight him. Trust came like a fragile truce, and it made something twist in his chest. He cleaned her hand, slow and careful, feeling her pulse beat faintly beneath strange, cool skin. Her nails were darker than her flesh, almost black, and curved just slightly at the tips. Small details that whispered of other skies, other worlds. "You're soldier," she said suddenly, her accent wrapping around the word like a ribbon. Eli froze, the rag pausing mid-motion. "What makes you say that?" She touched her own temple, then brushed her fingers against the scars on his forearm, pale lines from battles long past. "You fight," she said simply. Not a question. A truth. He let out a breath that sounded too much like a laugh. "Used." "Too. Not anymore." Her brow furrowed at that, the concept strange to her. Used to. Not anymore. In her world, maybe warriors didn't retire. In his, they broke, bled out, and buried themselves in the woods. She sank back against the cot, eyelids drooping. "You saved," she murmured. "Why?" Eli hesitated, staring at the dirt floor as the question clawed at old wounds. Why? He could have said instinct, training, the simple fact that leaving her there would have haunted him worse than the ghosts already living in his head. But the truth was heavier than words. Finally, he said, "Because someone should." Silence. Stretched between them, thick but not uncomfortable. Outside, the wind hissed through the trees, carrying the distant hum of drones, searching for what lay hidden beneath the earth. They both heard it, felt it, but neither spoke. Hours bled away like melted snow. She dozed in fits, waking sometimes, to find him still there, hunched in the chair, rifle across his knees. At some point, Hunger forced him upstairs. When he came back, it was with canned soup, steaming in a dented tin bowl. "Here," he said, sitting on the cot's edge. "You need this more than I do." Her eyes opened, hazy but aware, tracking the spoon as he lifted it toward her. She turned her head slightly, resisting, pride flashing even in her weakness. "Don't start," Eli said, voice gruff but gentle. "You'll eat, or I swear I'll find a way to hook this up to and for." He had no idea if her veins even worked like his, but it earned him a flicker of something amusement. Maybe. Her lips curved faintly as she let him feed her. The soup was gone before either of them realized it. She leaned back, exhaustion pulling her under again, and for a long while, Eli just sat there, staring at the way the lantern light traced her features, the high sweep of her cheekbones, the strange symmetry of her face. Alien, yes, unmistakably, and yet not so different. When she spoke again, her voice was a whisper brushing the edge of sleep. "My name, Valeri." Eli repeated it softly, the syllables unfamiliar but not unpleasant. Valeri. Her eyes flicked open at that, and something unspoken passed between them, acknowledgement, maybe even gratitude. Then her lashes lowered, and she slipped into dreams. Eli stayed there, listening to the storm above, to the distant hum that refused to fade. His hands flexed on his knees, and a truth settled over him like the falling snow. Whatever this was, whoever she was, it wasn't temporary. The moment he carried her out of that wreck, his life had stopped belonging to himself. And deep down, he wasn't sure he wanted it back. Asterisk snow fell in silence, soft flakes spiraling through the brittle branches overhead, blanketing the world. In white, Eli moved fast, boots crunching through the crust, his breath a ghost in the frozen air. His pack slammed against his spine with each stride, heavier than usual because of the weight cradled in his arms. Her head lolled against his chest, curls damp with sweat despite the bitter cold. The fever had taken hold sometime after. Midnight, burning through her with a heat so intense Eli could feel it even through her clothes. He'd woken to her trembling in the bunker, silver blood seeping through the bandages, eyes fever bright and wild as she whispered words he couldn't understand. Staying had stopped being an option. The drones were sweeping closer each day. He'd heard their mechanical chatter at dawn, riding the wind like knives. It was only a matter of time before they found the cabin. Before they found her, and he'd promised, the old hunter's shack lay miles away, buried deep in a thicket where the forest grew wild and the snow lay untouched. It wasn't much four walls, a roof and a rusted stove, but it was off-grid, out of sight. Maybe enough to buy them time. Eli adjusted his grip, his arms screaming with the effort of carrying her through knee-deep snow. She weighed less than a human would at her height, bones lighter, structure finer, but she wasn't weightless, and exhaustion gnawed at his muscles with every step. Still, he didn't stop. Couldn't, not with her breath fanning weak against his collarbone like the last flicker of a dying flame. By the time the shack loomed out of the white haze, Eli's legs were trembling. He shouldered the door open, sending a drift of snow scattering across the warped floorboards. Inside, it smelled of dust and old timber, the silence broken only by his ragged breathing. He laid her on the cot in the corner, brushed melting flakes from her hair, and pressed the back of his hand to her forehead. "Too hot. Damn it, too hot. Stay with me, Valeri," he muttered, stripping off his gloves with clumsy fingers. He dug through the pack for what little he'd brought: a canteen, a threadbare blanket, the emergency med kit. No antibiotics worth a damn. No tech. Just him. He built the fire fast, coaxing sparks from frozen kindling, feeding the flames until the stove roared with heat. Shadows danced across the walls, flickering over her face, painting her skin in molten tones, lavender deepening to bruised. Indigo, the color shifting like tides with every shallow breath. When he brought the canteen to her lips, she stirred faintly, lashes trembling. Eli, the sound of his name on her tongue soft, broken punched the air from his lungs. Yeah, he said, voice rough. I'm here. Her hand moved, slow as drifting ash, until her fingers brushed his wrist. Cool, even now. Her eyes opened, glowing dimly in the firelight. She looked at him like he was the last anchor in a world, sliding out from under her. You? Saved, she whispered, her accent curling around the word. Don't thank me yet, Eli said, forcing a smile he didn't feel. You're not out of this. She tried to speak again, but the words tangled into something in her language liquid. Sounds soft as snowfall. He caught one, barely. Zephyrin. What? He asked, leaning close, her lips curved faintly, almost a smile. Means finding home. Her eyes fluttered shut, her hand going limp against his. Eli sat there for a long moment, staring at her face, at the rise and fall of her chest. Then he bent and pressed his forehead to the back of her hand, drawing in a breath that tasted like smoke and fear and something dangerously close to hope. The fever broke at dawn. He dozed in the chair, rifle across his lap, only to wake. To silence, the kind that hummed with life instead of death. When he touched her cheek, the heat had faded. Her eyes opened slowly, clearer now, bright as polished amethyst in the pale morning light slanting through the cracked window. For the first time in days, Eli let himself breathe. They spent that day in a fragile rhythm, him stoking the fire, her gathering strength in slow increments. She ate a little, sipped water, even managed a faint laugh when he tried to mimic a word from her language and butchered it beyond recognition. The sound of it, a laugh like wind through glass chimes, lodged in his chest and stayed there. By nightfall, the world outside had turned silver under a sky littered with stars. Eli spread an old blanket near the stove, and they sat close, shoulders brushing, as he passed her a tin cup of whiskey. She sniffed it, wrinkling her nose, then took a sip and coughed hard enough to make him grin for the first time in weeks. You humans drink fire, she rasped, wiping her lips with the back of her hand. Puts hair on your chest, he said, her brow furrowed. Why want this? Forget it, he muttered, and she laughed again, softer this time. The conversation wandered his. World hers, the yawning gulf between them that felt smaller with every word. She told him about skies split by twin moons, about cities that floated above oceans of glass. He told her about desert nights and the way the air smelled before. Storm, and somewhere between the stories and the silence, his hand found hers. Or maybe hers found his. Either way, the touch lingered. Warm, certain. When she looked at him, there was no fear left. Only something fierce and fragile and infinite. The kiss happened like the first breath after drowning, sudden, desperate. Necessary? Her mouth was soft, tasting faintly of smoke and whiskey, and when she sighed against him, Eli thought, God help me, I'm never letting go. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire burned low, painting their bodies in molten light as they surrendered to the truth neither of them could keep pretending wasn't their God. And for one stolen night, the war, the drones, the entire goddamn galaxy fell away. There was only her. Only him. Only this. Asterisk. But at dawn, the sky tore open with silver fire, and everything they'd built was about to shatter. Asterisk. The world was quiet when the first streak of silver split. The dawn. Eli had been up for hours, restlessly pacing the shack while Valerie slept near. The stove, her skin aglow in the firelight like carved amethyst. Outside, the forest wore its crown of frost, hushed under the weight of fresh snow. It should have been peaceful. But Eli's gut had been whispering all night, and when the hum came a low, steady vibration threading through the bones of the earth, he knew why. He stepped outside into the pale gray morning. The cold bit deep, sharp enough to sting his lungs, but the sight above stole the air from him entirely. A ship hung over the tree line, sleek, silent. Its hull gleamed like liquid silver, the surface etched with lines of faintly glowing script. It didn't descend so much as appear, as if the sky had peeled back to reveal something vast and patient waiting in the dark. Eli's rifle was useless. He didn't even reach for it. What the hell could a man with a gun do against something like that? The hum deepened as a hatch irised open in the belly of the ship. 3 figures emerged, descending on columns of pale blue light that barely stirred the snow. They hit the ground with predatory grace, tall and lean, armored in plates that shimmered. Like polished bone, they looked like her. Eli's pulse hammered as the tallest of the 3 a woman, or what passed for one strode forward. Her braids were intricate, bound with metallic threads, and her eyes blazed a harder violet than Valari's, cold as stars. The others flanked her like living shadows. Eli didn't move. Not when she stopped 10 paces away, her voice slicing through the silence in accented English. Scout Valari. Command believed you dead. You will board immediately. Eli's jaw tightened. Board? That word tasted like the end of something. He opened his mouth, but the cabin door swung behind him first, hinges groaning in protest. Valari stood there. She, dressed in what remained of her suit. Though it hung in tatters, her skin still bruised in shades of lavender and indigo. Her hair tumbled loose around her shoulders, catching the pale light like strands of shadow and silver. But her spine was straight, her chin high, the posture of someone who'd worn command like a second skin long before crashing into his world. Commander. Toffin, she said, her voice steady despite the tension humming through every line of her body. The tall alien inclined her head. You survived. That is fortunate. The war demands all available personnel. Prepare for departure. No. The word was quiet. Absolute. It hung in the cold air like a blade. Commander Taven's eyes narrowed. No? Valari stepped forward, snow crunching under bare feet. Her hand reached back, not searching, but finding Eli's, fingers threading. Through his with a certainty that made his breath hitch. I will not return without him. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the commander's gaze flicked to Eli, scanning him like a problem to be solved. Disgust twisted her sharp features. Impossible. Toffin said flatly. Regulations forbid. The regulations? Valari snapped, her voice ringing like steel on stone. Say nothing of Zephyrin. The other 2 soldiers shifted, alarm flashing across their faces. The word dropped between them like a detonator. Eli didn't know what it meant, but from the way Toffin stiffened, he knew it mattered. Valari, the commander hissed. You would invoke that here? For this? Her gaze raked Eli from boots to shadowed jaw, as if the very idea of him was an insult carved in flesh. Valari's skin brightened to molten silver, defiance burning through her like fire. This is not a matter for debate. I have found my heart home. I will not abandon it for a war that has already taken too much from us all. Eli swallowed hard, pulse roaring in his ears. Heart home. Even without knowing the language, he understood. And it terrified him more than any firefight he'd ever walked into, because it wasn't just her future on the line now. It was his. Taven's voice dropped, quiet and lethal. You know what you are asking. If he comes, he will be hunted by every eye in the Dominion. He will be marked for death by the Ilari syndicates. He will never again draw breath without risk. Valari didn't blink. Then I will share that risk. The commander's gaze slid back to Eli, sharp as broken glass. And you, human? Will you crawl into a sky you do not understand? Will you leave your planet, your life for her? Eli's breath smoked in the cold. He looked at the ship, an impossible thing of light and silence, and then at the woman standing before him, fingers gripping his like a lifeline. Her eyes burned violet in the snow, fierce and pleading all at once. He thought of the years he'd spent running from ghosts, of nights where silence was a noose and mornings broke like brittle glass. He thought of the first time she'd whispered his name, broken and beautiful, like it was something worth saving. And the choice was terrifyingly simple. "I've been dead for years," he said, his voice low and rough as gravel. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss against knuckles cold as starlight. "You brought me back. Where you go, I go." Something flickered across Taven's face, surprise, maybe even respect, before it shuddered behind a wall of duty. She turned sharply, signaling to the others. "The war has claimed too many lives already," she said. "Perhaps it is time it gave something back. Board the ship, both of you. We depart in 10 minutes. As they ascended the ridge toward the waiting craft, Valari's grip never loosened. Her skin glowed silver bright against his weathered hand, and for one breathless moment, Eli let himself believe in endings that didn't taste like ash. He didn't. See the way Tafin watched him from behind, her expression carved from ice. He didn't hear the quiet words she spoke into her combs as the ship's hatch yawned open like the mouth of some vast and patient god. "Target secured," she said. "Phase 2 begins." And far above the clouds, the stars waited, ancient and merciless. Asterisk, the hum of the alien ship was like nothing Eli had ever heard. Low, resonant, a sound that vibrated in his bones more than in his ears. The moment they crossed the threshold of the hatch, the world he knew vanished behind them, swallowed by the gleaming interior of a vessel that looked grown, not built. Smooth silver walls curved like the inside of a seashell, pulsing faintly with veins of blue light that shifted as if alive. Valeri stayed close, her hand warm in his, but her silence pressed harder than the gravity tugging at his gut. Her posture rigid, formal, was a mask Eli recognized too well. He'd worn it himself once, in deserts that reeked of dust and blood, the face of someone bracing for what came next. They moved down a corridor that seemed to breathe, panels glowing brighter with each step. Eli's boots sounded foreign on the slick floor. The two soldiers flanking them never spoke, but their eyes, violet shards cold as distant stars, never left him. A weapon, a threat, a thing that didn't belong. When the corridor widened into a chamber, Eli stopped dead. The viewport dominated the far wall, a seamless arc of crystal that opened onto the infinite. Earth hung there, blue, green, white so achingly beautiful. It punched the air from his lungs, but small now, distant, a marble dangling on black silk. His home, his past, everything he'd been before Valeri, shrinking into irrelevance with every second. Asterisk, his chest tightened. He wanted to speak, to say something to her, to anyone, but the words died when the commander stepped into the glow. Tafin, her braids, shimmered with threads of metal, her armor whispering as she moved, and her expression was carved from something harder than stone. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a low bench that slid from the wall as if summoned by thought. Eli sat, because there was nothing else to do. Tafin stood over him, studying his face like she was mapping the fault lines. "You understand what you've done, human?" Eli met her gaze without flinching. "Yeah, I chose her." His voice was steady, but the steel in it surprised even him. Taven's lips curved, not a smile, but something sharp enough to cut. "No, you chose war." The words hit harder than a bullet. Eli stared, and for a moment all he could hear was the thrum of the ship and the hollow rush of blood in his ears. "What the hell are you talking about?" Valeri moved then, stepping forward, her voice soft but clear. Eli, asterisk, he turned to her, and the look in her eyes stripped the breath from his lungs. Regret? Guilt? Something worse? Tell me, he said, his voice low. Dangerous. She knelt. Before him, her hands finding his, fingers curling tight as if to anchor herself. My crash. It was not chance. I was sent to your world because we knew what was coming. The syndicates, they have marked your planet. For cleansing. Asterisk Eli's mind stuttered, refused to process the word. Cleansing. He tasted metal, realized his fists were clenched so tight, his nails cut into his palms. They intend to erase Earth, Toffin said, her tone clinical, merciless. Its resources. And needed for the Dominion. Your species will not survive the year unless someone stops them. And that someone, Eli said slowly, is you? His laugh was sharp, bitter. You came to play savior? Valerie shook her head, her grip on his hands tightening. No, Eli, not me. Her eyes lifted to his, and what he saw there turned his blood to ice. You. The room tilted, a slow spin that left him breathless. Me? The word scraped out raw. Lady, I'm just a man with a busted rifle and too many ghosts. You've got fleets, soldiers. What the hell do you need me for? Because you are. What they are not, Toffin said. Unpredictable. Relentless. A species that survives by turning weakness into strength. We have studied your kind for centuries. In war, you are chaos given form. Valari's voice broke through, fierce and trembling. You are hope, Eli, not because of guns or ships, but because you do not stop, because you are what they never expect. Silence stretched, taut as wire. Eli stared past them, past the alien walls and glowing veins of light, to the viewport where Earth floated, oblivious and fragile. He thought of the cabin buried in snow, of the quiet mornings with coffee steaming against frosted glass. He thought of her bleeding on his porch, whispering his name in a voice that had made him feel alive for the first time in years. And now this, when he spoke, his voice was quiet enough to make them lean in. You're telling me I didn't just walk away from my life. I walked into the middle of a war for my species. Yes, Toffin said simply. He laughed then, a rough, joyless sound, and dragged a hand over his face. And here I thought, this week couldn't get any worse. Valerie flinched, and that broke something in him. He reached for her, cupped her jaw in his calloused hand. You should have told me. I feared you would not come, she whispered. You're damn right, I wouldn't, he said, and then softer, fierce as a vow. But now that I'm here, I'm not running. Not from them. Not from this. His gaze lifted to Toffin, hard. As hammered steel. You want me to fight? Fine. But I don't take orders from anyone who sees me as expendable. You treat me like a soldier, not a pawn. Deal? For the first time, Taven's expression cracked. Respect flickered, quick and cold. She inclined her head. Deal. Valari's breath left her in a shudder. She pressed her forehead to his, her voice a whisper only he could hear. Cephalin, she murmured, even in war. He didn't know the word, not really. But he knew what it felt like. The ship shuddered, engines singing as they punched through the last tether of Earth's. Gravity. Eli looked through the viewport one last time as the blue marble dwindled into a pinprick of color, bright and helpless against the void. They're not ready, he thought, chest tightening with something sharp and brutal. But I got behind him, alarms. Pulsed low, steady. Ahead, stars burned cold and merciless. And Eli Thorne once, a man trying to vanish, rose from the bench with a new truth carved into his bones. Love hadn't saved him. It had turned him into the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy. The end.